So what are the hottest trends in alt cycling and cycling in general to look for in 2025? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I spoke about a few of these things with my co-host Nolan in our podcast. Definitely check out the podcast if you want to see his take of the things to watch in 2025. But without further ado, let's get into it. The first trend that I'm definitely going to have my eye on in 2025 is the rise of alternative components. I think we'll see the release of derailleurs and possibly shifters that aren't from SRAM or Shimano that will generate some buzz. Some things have trickled out already. There is the Madrone Components Jab rear derailleur. It's wide range, adjustable cable pull, serviceable, and also supposedly 2x friendly. If you want to learn more about what they're cooking over at Madrone, definitely check out our podcast interview with Aaron. And there's also Vivo Cycling, a very small brand creating some enduro mountain bike components. I totally dig the silver shifter. It looks absolutely beautiful. I doubt that we'll see it, but I'd love to see the trend of silver cycling components once again. One interesting thing about Vivo Cycling is they have a highly customizable shifter, so you can change different aspects of it to really suit your needs. And of course, there is the Italian brand Ingrid, and they're visually distinct and often ripped off cranks, unfortunately, as well as their accompanying shifters. They have a thumb shifter that works now for mountain bikes. They have been teasing out some road drifters. Along the same line, there is Rivendell, who, if you follow their journey, they've been working on creating a new rapid rise rear derailleur, and it sounds as if it's actually going to happen. They were trying to get it made in the US, but no one would touch it. Even manufacturers overseas wouldn't touch it. But it sounds as if Microshift, thanks again Microshift, has decided to take on the project. So there's a good chance that we will see a new rapid rise rear derailleur in 2025. Aside from the rear derailleur, they're also supposed to be working on a front derailleur, and I think they're making some modifications to their silver cranks. So a lot of new components to look forward to from Rivendell. Talking about 2x cranks, this is one area that I'm super excited about. I think 2025 might be the year where 2x is a new 1x. There's going to be a lot of interesting options next year. Our own collab crank with Mary Sales / Soma Fabrications should come out next year. I've already made a separate video about it, so definitely check that out. But basically, it's going to use a Holotech 2 spindle, but you mount chain rings to it using the SRAM 3-bolt standard, and we're going to have our own 110 to 74 BCD spider, both in silver and in black, and potentially some purple and teal chain rings, which I hope actually happens. So look for that in the coming future. More immediately available in the near term are these cranks by the German brand Cybercycles. If you're not familiar with them, definitely check them out. They're calling their brand of components retrofuturism, so kind of neo-retro. The idea is that you're mixing new school tech with some old school vibes. They've got some new square taper cranks that should be out by the time this video is published. What's interesting about it is that although it uses the square taper standard, you mount rings to it using SRAM direct mount, and they're also going to have their own 110/74 spider as well. I think the 110/74 spider for them was kind of a recent addition. A bunch of people had told me that they had been bugging them to make a 110/74 spider at the Bespoke show in Dresden. So that's one thing I love about small makers. They tend to be pretty responsive to market demand. And yes, square taper ain't dead quite yet. And lastly, in the alt components category, it's becoming more and more difficult to ignore Asian brands that are making components like LT Wu, Wheeltop, S-Ride. I know currently all the internet seems to be abuzz with the Wheeltop electronic drivetrain. It's really not something I'm interested in, but I may buy some mechanical components from L2 to test for peak mechanical. I've historically ignored that space because if you can buy something that you want from Shimano and SRAM, then why not? But as parts get more expensive and more laden with electronics, these other component groups from China and Taiwan are looking more and more tempting as viable options. The next big trend, sadly, I think we'll see in 2025 is more business closures. What's that saying? The beatings will continue until morale improves. It seems as if the industry is not quite out of the woods and that the industry beating is going to continue quite a bit longer. With the news of Bike Staple GT winding down and Rocky Mountain restructuring, it seems as if the bloodletting is not quite done. There was a saying I'd heard from bike brands, survive until 25, with the hopes that 2025 would be the year that things turn around after the post-pandemic slump. However, with the increase of, protectionist policies, tariffs, the threat of trade war, there will likely be more turmoil in the bike industry as everyone moves their factories around and tries to navigate our shifting geopolitical landscape. In the short term, I think that means more brands will still feel the pinch, as well as the consumers, as prices are likely to go up. So next big trend to watch. A lot of channels are talking about this now, but Nolan and I actually talked about this topic well over a year ago at this point, and that is the rediscovery of aluminum bikes as a performance alternative to steel because it's, lighter, and carbon because it's potentially less expensive but also more durable. I think one of the disciplines where this is really poised to take off is, of course, gravel bikes or any bike design with tires wider than 40 millimeters. I feel like at that tire width in a gravel bike, a lot of the material feel is negated by what you're actually feeling from the tire. In that podcast over a year ago, we talked about some smaller brands that were kind of leading the charge in this boutique aluminum space. One of them is the brand Blackheart. Another one is Beach Club, which is the house brand of the It's Not a Bike Shop in Los Angeles. Here in the EU, we've got brands like Massican popping up, which are handmade in Italy, and there's Guava Bikes, which are designed here in Spain. Stateside, there is Velo Orange. They have their chassis gravel bike slash ATB coming out. So I think we'll see a lot more development, a lot more brands getting back into the aluminum frame game. And I suspect as the squeeze continues and people are still more price sensitive, aluminum will become a more attractive option. So next big trend that I'm seeing, but I also hope to see, is the continued growth of the alt cycling movement. Okay, so I admit I'm a little invested in this one, but I do think there will be a continued growth of the alt cycling movement, for lack of better terms. People who want to ride bikes but don't see themselves in the neatly defined categories of road cyclists, mountain biker, even gravel cyclists, which now feels more and more road adjacent these days. So people who ride bikes just for fun, the untrained and unwashed masses who have sort of languished in isolation since there aren't unifying events like a race or Grand Fondo to gather. But that too is changing. We're seeing new styles of alt cycling events like Ron's Nutmeg Nor'easter, Jeff's Hodag Ramble. On this side of the pond, the brand Brother hosts a bike packing, bike camping event called Brother in the Wild. Here in Spain, there is a women's group based out of Madrid called Rare Femmes, and they just hosted their first women's only bike camping and gravel event. All these events are less about the podium and more about vibes. So less fastest known times and more funnest known times. Not grand fondos, but grand fundos. You see what I did there? It's that UCLA degree at work, baby. Some big cycling brands just hire me to write their copy. All joking aside, there is a rise of alt events, both in demand and in production. I know for us, I think this is a year that we put our money where our mouth is and start doing party pace rides here in Spain. So if you happen to be in the area, watch this space, follow us on Instagram to learn more. And also there's just a rise of alternative cycling creators on YouTube. 7 years ago when I started doing this full time, there was literally like nobody. But now I see lots of channels that identify in that alt cycling space, which I think is awesome. I mean, the more of that content that gets created, the more people will find it and discover that there is an alternative path to cycling where you don't have to optimize every aspect of it. Definitely check out my recent video on the rise of alternative cycling YouTube if you want to find some different cycling content to spice up your feed, make it a little strange again, and just watch something different from your regularly scheduled programming from the bike racing industrial complex. You know what all these alt cycling channels need? Even this one is your support. As big as our channel is, we do very little sponsorship. And when we do, it's to make sure we're not losing money on videos like our Peak Mechanical series. Because we are an alternative channel, for lack of better words, we don't fit within the neat boxes of the big brands. They're not throwing money at us. We essentially have to do a bake sale every month, selling stickers and merch and other good stuff. That's why we urge you, if you guys enjoy this content, join us on Patreon. That lets us have a budget so we can do things, buy things to review, tinker with, pay rent, which is cool. But that's it for the trends I'm watching in 2025. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, keep the supple side down.